Hello friends, today we'll take up the issues faced by people with disabilities. Now, General Studies paper 2 has a part which talks about welfare schemes for vulnerable sections of the population. In this particular part, we discuss about the different vulnerable sections. They face some sort of discrimination or they need more protection. People with disabilities are considered vulnerable. They are sometimes marginalized. They face some sort of discrimination. So what mechanisms we have in place for them? What policies, what schemes we have? What is their objective situation? All these things we cover under this particular topic. So we'll start with the topic. But before we get into it, I'll just give you a brief overview of things we are going to cover. What are going to be the key learnings in this session? First of all, we'll try to understand the meaning of disability. What is the meaning of disability? What are the different dimensions? Then we will look at some numbers which point to the fact that disabled population, they are vulnerable. They might be lagging behind the mainstream. So and these numbers will point to the same thing, point to the same fact. Now we also look at some reasons why disability can happen. What are the different types of disability and what can be the reasons for that? Then we will look at some major concerns related to disability. What are some issues, what are some challenges that people with disability face? Then we will look at some issues which are quite frequent in the news. Then we will look at some policy interventions that we have in place. What are some domestic, some legal provisions we have, some statutory provisions we have. Apart from that, India is also signatory of some international agreement. So we'll look at those international agreements as well. And the final part, we will look at some challenges when it comes to drafting policy for the disabled population. And we'll also look at some solutions how to improve on that. So this is going to be the entire structure of our learning today. So we'll start with the topic. So first thing I would like to ask you, I would like to analyze, what do you understand by disability? What do you think it is? Is it some sort of physical impairment, mental issues? What is it? Is it a medical condition or is it more than that? Just give it a thought. Is it only medical or is it something more than that? So on the screen, you can look at the definition of disability, which has been given by United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. This definition says, disability is an evolving concept. Disability results from the interaction between persons with impairments and attitudinal environmental barriers that hinders their full and effective participation in society on equal basis with others. That means people with some impairments, when they are interacting with people who do not have any impairments, with the environment, at that point of time, there are some issues which hinders their participation. And that is the reason they cannot equally participate in the functioning of society. So some people are there who might have some impairments, it can be a medical condition. When they're interacting with the environment, when they're interacting with other members of society, there can be some challenges, there can be some barriers because of which they are not able to fully participate or they're not able to participate on equal terms. So definitely there is some impairment, but disability is more than that. Disability is a social phenomenon. Disability is more than just a medical condition. Or in other words, disability refers to the situation of those facing a barrier. That means people who have some impairments, they're facing a barrier to normal functioning because some sort of socio-economic cultural constraints have been imposed. That means if the socio-economic cultural constraints are not there, people who are having some impairments, they will also be able to effectively participate in the society. So disability is that situation, is that constraint, that socio-economic cultural constraint, is a condition, is a result of these constraints which exist in the society. So you can also think about it in these terms. What do you understand by these socio-economic cultural constraints? For example, a person who has some sort of disability, has some sort of impairment, and then there is another person who does not have any impairment. If both of them are applying for a job and both of them are equally qualified for the role, but it might so happen that the employer will prefer someone who does not have a disability. So here there is some economic barrier, so socio-economic barrier, there is some sort of discrimination on the side of the employer. Okay, another way you can look at it, sometimes people with disability are looked down upon, especially those who are having mental disabilities. They said that it is a consequence of something they did in the past, something evil they might have done, because of that they're being punished. So these are cultural barriers. This is not real, but people do accept it. Culture, society talks about it. So and sometimes people with disability might not be allowed to join in some auspicious occasions. There can be some discrimination against them as well. So socio-economic and cultural barriers exist, which prevent people with some sort of impairment from effectively participating in the functioning of society. They're not participating on equal terms. So when you are thinking about disability, think about it on social ways, on social conditions, on social terms. It is more than a medical phenomenon, it is a social phenomenon. Now the next thing, we'll look at some facts, some numbers, which gives us a picture of the position of the people with disability in the society. For example, what is the number of people with disability? How many people in India have some form of disability? Now as per the latest census, census 2011, it is 2.1%, around 26.8 million. And also among them, the number of men is more. Men are more disabled as compared to women. The maximum number of disability is in the age category 10 to 19 years. More number of people you will find in rural areas, so 69%. As per census, we have 26.8 million people who have some form of disability. But World Bank says that this number is definitely more, as we have more than 26.8 million people. They're saying the number is somewhere between 40 million to 80 million. WHO also says that globally around 15% of the people have some form of disability. In case of India, it is 2.1. For WHO says for India also this figure should be around 10 to 12%. It cannot be this low. So the question that you can have in your mind is, why there is so much discrepancy? Census says 26.8 million, World Bank says 40 to 80 million. Again, this is also huge window. 2.1% is what is census saying. WHO is saying 15% are there, and they also say around 10 to 12% in India are disabled. What can be the reason why there is so much variation in the number of people with disability? See, the point here is the measurement of disability can be subjective. The number of criteria you take, that will vary. So if one particular, so for example, census, if it is taking let's say 7 criteria, and if WHO is taking 21 criteria or 15 criteria, the numbers will vary. So what is exactly disability? The way it is defined, what forms are considered, that will result in change in these numbers. So that is the reason why we have so much discrepancy. And so this also brings us to one important observation. If you want to have good policies to handle the challenges people with disability face, you need to have good data. Your data should be very accurate, it should be more representative, then only you can have better policies. Or else the issues that people with disability face will not be addressed, because people will be excluded, because you are not taking them when you are calculating the numbers. So importance of data, you should keep in mind. Now, what about their educational levels? People with disability, those who are in the age category 5 to 19 years, 61% of them are attending some educational institution, which is below national average, and around 55% are literate. The literacy rate of India is more than this. So when it comes to education, people with disability are lagging behind. Also, there is some sort of backwardness when it comes to workforce participation rates. People with disability, only 1/3 of people who have some form of disability are working. And among them also, you can observe one thing, less women are working, more men are working. 47% of male disabled persons, they are in the labor workforce, and just 23% of disabled female are in the workforce. So again, almost half. Disabled women's labor force participation rate is almost half that of disabled men's labor force participation rate, and both these numbers are less as compared to the workforce participation rate of men without any disability and women without any disability. Next thing, what kind of disability is more common? So 20% of disability is disability in movement. Mobility is a problem. Then 90% have problems when it comes to seeing. They cannot see. Again, 90% have hearing disabilities, audio impairments, and some 8% have multiple disabilities, multiple forms of disabilities can be there. So these are some numbers related to people with disability. Now, the next question you can have in mind is disability something which can be controlled, or it is completely on the basis of luck? If you are fortunate enough, then you will not have any form of disability, you will not have any form of impairment. So to analyze this thing, just think along these dimensions. Disability can be two types. One is an individual can be born with some disability, or the other is it has been acquired during one's life. Two types of disabilities primarily. Now, why is an individual born with some form of disability? What can be the reasons? Maybe the pregnant female was not able to reach a healthcare institution on time. Accessibility or affordability to healthcare institutions was not there. What was the consequence? There were some complications during delivery which can lead to some form of impairment in the child. Or maybe the female was not having access to adequate resources. Care was not given to her. The pregnant female did not get the adequate care during pregnancy. Adequate amount of nutrients was not there. The immunization that is required, injections that are required was not available to her. Because of which what is happening? Again, the child born is impacted. Or after delivery also, access to all these things was not there. She's not able to derive proper nutrition, and the child derives nutrition from the lactating mom, lactating mother, which is not the case because the female is not having nutrition, the child is also not having sufficient nutrition. So in that case, also the child will be impacted. It can also lead to some sort of disability. So accessibility to medical facilities, affordability of medical facilities, lack of care can impact disability in future. And these are all disabilities with which an individual is born. What can be some other reason why an individual is born with disability? It has been observed that there is a very strong correlation between poverty and disability. So the question you can have in your mind is how poverty and disability are linked together. What is the reason? Sometimes because of poverty, what might happen is the female is forced to work even during the later stages of her pregnancy. Last stage she is also working. If she is working in the last months of pregnancy, there can be an impact on the child. And again, the child form is born with some sort of impairment. So an individual is born with poverty because of all these multiple factors. A female is working in the later stages of pregnancy. During delivery, she was not able to afford or access a healthcare institution, which led to complications. And sometimes during pregnancy, during lactation, while she's lactating, she's not having sufficient nutrition. All these things can lead to disability in a child, some sort of impairment. So just think about all these things. These are all related to more or less poverty or lack of access to healthcare facilities. And these things can be avoided if proper healthcare facilities is there, if universal health coverage is there, if everyone has access to healthcare institutions, this can be taken care of. If proper nutrition is provided to the child through the mother, this thing could have been provided. If there is some mechanism by which she can avoid work in the later stages of pregnancy, this can be avoided. So sometimes these kind of disabilities, born with disability, can be avoided. It is not always on the basis of luck or misfortune, absence of luck. Now, another type of disability is disability which is acquired during one's lifetime. What do we mean by this? How disability is acquired during lifetime? For example, there can be a road accident. An individual might lose out on his limbs and he becomes disabled. So there can be accidents. There can be different wars, violence. There can be disasters, natural disasters. See, most of these things can be avoided. A war can be avoided. An accident can be avoided. Possibly a natural calamity cannot be avoided, but it can be managed. In your syllabus also, there is a topic disaster management. What is disaster management? You are trying to manage disasters. You have different mechanisms for that. So if disaster can be managed, the disability which could have happened because of the disaster could also be avoided. So many of the reasons which lead to disability can be avoided. And the most prominent factor is poverty. If you are tackling poverty, you are addressing disability. So keep this in mind. So when we discuss about poverty alleviation schemes, indirectly we are also targeting disability. So these are some of the reasons for disability. Now, what are some major concerns related to people with disability? What are some of the problems they face? What are some of the issues people with disability face? For example, people with disability are more likely to be in the low income groups. In the previous slide, we saw that disability and poverty, they're linked together. One of the reasons for disability can be poverty. At the same time, disability also can lead to poverty. How? One thing, when it comes to definition, we saw disability means there are different socio-economic constraints. People are having some impairments, but the societal structures, the culture, they put some barriers which prevents people from effectively participating. So here what is happening? People who are having some form of impairment, they're not allowed to participate in the society. So economic barriers are imposed on them. So because of which also they can remain in the low income groups. And also what happens in case there is a family of 4 members, one person has some form of disability and he is not able to contribute to the incomes, and it might so happen that he is completely dependent on others. So in that case, you might need someone in the family who has to take care of this individual all the time. So in that case, what happens? This person will also lose out on incomes. So generally, if there is a family which has a member who has some form of disability, then more than one member can be impacted because of it. So generally, they are concentrated in lower economic groups. Education levels, we saw it is less. More likely, those who have disability are educated. The employment rates are low, 47%, 23% among disabled men and disabled females respectively. And this gap to the general population has increased. It has not gone down. Ideally, it should have gone down. Many times, they are not aware of their own rights and entitlements. There have been different schemes, policies, provisions, but many times people with disabilities are not aware of it. We have reservation policy for people with disabilities, but many times these kind of openings they remain vacant. So people might not be aware of it. And also, a very unfortunate scenario. There is a strong social stigma against people with disability. Communities and families, they might discriminate. And sometimes people with disability also agree with this. They also might have internalized the stigma. For example, there is this particular image I got from a World Bank report. So they had done a study. So this is a study among 2 states, Tamil Nadu and Uttar Pradesh. So what they're finding out, they're trying to study what kind of perception people have when it comes to disability. Some of them, because it's a very commonsensical notion in some parts of the country that disability is because of the curse of the god. And see what they're finding out. In Tamil Nadu, those people who do not have any form of disability, among them, around 50% they believe that disability is a curse of God. And also among people who have some form of disability, almost equal, around 48-49%, they also believe the same thing, that it is because of some curse of God. And in UP also the situation is not very different. Those who do not have any disability, among them the perception is less, but those who have some form of disability, it is even more. They feel that disability is because of some form of curse that they have got from God. So there is a social stigma associated. People with disability also might believe in the same thing. Now, some more illustrations here. For example, out of school children by social category. So those who have disability, the numbers are high as compared to the average. So out of school children, less than 10%. For those who are having some form of disability, it is very high. So these kind of images, these kind of illustrations, they prove the fact that people with disability suffer from some sort of discrimination, some sort of social stigma. Apart from this, there are some other reasons to be worried about. Some other articles or some other, so you might have come across many news articles which talk about some challenges that people with disability face. We will look into them one by one. A few topics related to that. Apart from the challenges that people with disability face when it comes to economic opportunities, employment, social stigma, etc., there is another major concern that women with disability specifically face: the issue of sexual abuse. These kind of incidents, almost every other day you will come across in newspapers. Women with disabilities are more vulnerable to these forms of exploitation, sexual exploitation. Many times it might happen that these kind of incidents are happening within different kind of hospitals, shelter homes, and the women are more vulnerable because sometimes because of these impairments, they are not able to communicate. And because they are not able to communicate, these kind of incidents can happen repeatedly. Also, our legal and policy mechanisms that we have might not be sufficient to handle these issues. So, sexual abuse and disability, this overlap, it needs to be handled. We need to draft appropriate policies, or we need to have some mechanism to handle it. So, what can be done to address this specific challenge? For example, women here, there can be instances where there is some sort of impairment, maybe the speech impairment, because of which they are not able to communicate. So, one suggestion can be you can increase their access to different interpreters or social workers who will be able to translate what they mean to say. Another, or one more thing that can be done is whenever this kind of exploitation is there, a person can fall into trauma. So you need to provide them some sort of support, moral support, emotional support. They need cognitive help. So counselor service should be made available in case these kind of incidents have happened. These are very specific kind of incidents. We need to train the police officials, judiciary officials, medical professionals to handle these kind of specific issues. Sensitization is a must. Apart from this, since this kind of exploitation happens many times within hospitals and shelter homes, we need to devise certain standard operating procedures that need to be followed here. For example, who are given access to which part of these institutions, for what duration they are given access, regular monitoring of their activities. Also, while recruiting them, we need to have a very careful selection process, very good selection process. Apart from that, they should be regularly trained. So all these things are very important to handle the vulnerability of exploitation of females with some sort of impairment, some sort of disability. Now, another kind of news, which is quite another kind of news article which you will quite frequently come across in all newspapers, news channels, etc., is the issue of aviation, is the issue of mobility. People with disability find it very difficult to move from one place to another. Mobility is one of the challenges. We also saw one thing that if you look at the different types of disability related to the movement is maximum. People with disability find it very difficult to travel. And one of the issues that you quite often come across in newspaper is the issue of civil aviation and disability. That means sometimes people with disability might not be allowed to board flights. And this kind of news happens repeatedly. So what can be the reason for this? Is there any guideline which prevents people with disability from taking a plane by the deboarded? And many times they are deboarded without giving any explanation. What can be the reason? So as per the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, this is a regulatory body for civil aviation, just like you have Insurance Regulatory Development Authority for insurance sector. For aviation, you have DGCA. Now, DGCA has given its guidelines. DGCA in its civil aviation requirement says no airline shall refuse to carry persons with disability. So the regulator is saying you cannot discriminate among your passengers. You have to ensure that people with disability are able to travel. But why this discrimination is there? So DGCA, what it does, it has some guidelines. It says that all these airlines, they need to train their crew members. So the crew members, the flight crew, ground crew, all of them should have some sensitization programs related to people with disability. But it does not decide the content. DGCA does not decide the content of these programs. It is up to the individual airline to decide what kind of content these programs should have. So as a consequence, what has happened? They devise their own content and there is no uniformity. So again, they might discriminate. If DGCA had given some uniform guidelines that these are the guidelines you have to follow, then this problem might have been taken care of. But these guidelines are not there. Apart from this, DGCA says that airlines cannot refuse someone from boarding the plane, but it does not prescribe any consequences if they are not complying with this particular guideline. That means if an airline refuses someone, there is no penal provision. In case there is no penal provision, then there is no disincentive for them from not following these instructions. So as a consequence of this, many times you come across news articles that people have been deboarded without giving any reason. And the sensitization programs that these airlines have had, they have primarily focused on reduced mobility. That means a person is not able to walk, is not able to reach a particular destination. And in fact, in most of our programs related to people with disabilities, we will see the same. They're only focusing on reduced mobility. So they will provide some ramp or they will provide some wheelchair. And generally the perception is there that this is only about disability. People forget that there can be multiple dimensions, multiple types of disability. For example, someone is not able to speak, someone is not able to hear. Those kind of disabilities are also there. So that the focus is not on that. So these sensitization programs should also focus on these areas. Apart from that, many of the ticketing websites by which you can purchase tickets for civil aviation, they are also not disability friendly. So as a consequence of which, the mobility of people with disability gets hindered. So we need to have adequate mechanism to handle this. In recent times, we have had some campaigns, for example, Accessible India campaign or the Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan, which tries to handle some issues related to this. We'll come to this topic, Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan or the Accessible India campaign in a while. Now, another issue related to people with disability is the issue related to education. People with some form of disability, they lag behind when it comes to education. We saw the literacy rates are less. And also, one thing you keep in mind, the importance of education. What is education? Education is the sum total of two things, skills and value. Now, if I need to have, or if I need to draft an education curriculum, I should draft it so that it also inculcates values. Generally, the focus is only on the skills, but value is a very important dimension. The society that we see right now might have different kind of issues. For example, the issues related to people with disability. There is some sort of social stigma. So people within the society, they discriminate members who have some form of disability. So education system can play a very significant role in reducing this kind of social stigma. We'll see how. Now, there is an ongoing debate right now. The debate between inclusive education on one hand and specialized education on the other hand. What do we mean by these terms? How these two forms of education can be empowering? At the end of the day, what should be the purpose of education? It is inculcating skills, it is inculcating values. So your process of education should ensure both these things. Now, and again, education is a factor which can bring about social change that we have already seen in the first session that we had, the session related to Indian society. Now, education can bring about social change, it can reduce social stigma that people have towards people with disabilities. So education has a role to play. We'll see how education can be powerful. So there is an ongoing debate going on, right now, between inclusive education and specialized education. Now, what is specialized education? Specialized education means the kind of education in which specialized training is provided. That means you have special teachers, they provide some sort of skills to children with disability. So here what has happened, children with disability, they go to some specialized institutions, separate schools are there, where only people with children with disability, will be there and they will have access to specialized teachers. So that type of education is specialized education. So the classroom will have only children with disability. It will not have members of, or it will not have any children who do not have any form of disability. So this is specialized education. Now, there is another point of view, the proponent of inclusive education. What do we mean by inclusive education? Now, the term itself, inclusive. Inclusive education means including everyone. This particular concept of inclusive education means, or it assumes certain things. It assumes that every child has some barrier to education. Each and every child, all children, they face some sort of barrier to learning. For example, there can be a girl child. A girl child might be facing some cultural barrier. Her parents or the society might be restricting her mobility. They don't want her to be educated. So she might be facing some sort of cultural barrier. So it is a barrier to her learning. A child who is coming from a family which never had education. For example, first learners. In their entire family history, no one has taken up education. So the first learner is also facing some form of barrier. Because when the child goes back to the family, goes back to his home, there is no support system. There is no one who he can ask, who he can consult. Since he's the first learner, first person to be learning in the entire family. So that child has some sort of barriers. Similarly, a tribal child also faces some barrier to learning. What kind of barrier a tribal child faces? The kind of education system we have, it generally talks about the mainstream culture. A tribal child's culture will be different. He or she might not be able to relate to the mainstream culture, and that can be a hindrance to his learning process. Just imagine a scenario when you are being taught about Halloween and Thanksgiving and not about Indian festivals. How will you be able to relate to those things? You have never experienced that. With time now, with globalization, these things you might be experiencing, but previously it was very difficult for us to understand what all these things were. So, same scenario with a tribal child. The culture is different, the language might be different. It's very difficult for a child to understand. So that is a barrier to his or her learning. Similarly, a child with some sort of impairment might have some barriers. So each and every child has some barrier. Now, so what is the role of a teacher? The role of a teacher is to address this barrier, to understand the barrier that the specific child is facing and address it. So that is the challenge here. That is what the teacher's role is. So identify those gaps and provide individualized education. No child is a failure. Each learner's challenge is special. Each learner has a special challenge. We have to address that. So in an inclusive classroom, inclusive institution, you have an institution where all the children, or different types of children belonging from different parts of society, or children having different kind of barriers, they're all together. And the teacher should be able to identify those gaps and should be able to address that. So this is what is inclusive education. Everyone is part of the same classroom. The classroom is the reflection of what exactly society looks like. Society, whatever you have in society, same thing is classroom. Now, what is the advantage here? The advantage here is the society that will be created because of this, will be more empathetic. Children did not discriminate. When a child is born, he is born with a blank slate, blank mind. It is a society which tells him about the values, norms, etc. Children do not discriminate. It is a society which discriminates. Society, the social learning, the values, norms, etc. is inculcated into the society. Now, if children are growing up like this in a classroom which is inclusive, they will understand the issues that children with disability face. They will understand each other's barrier, and they will try to overcome it. There have been many schools where these kind of things are taken up. They have inclusive classrooms. Many schools in Canada. In fact, there are some schools in India as well where we have inclusive education, and the learning outcomes are really good. Everyone gets benefited in the process. One thing here, even if it is an inclusive classroom, inclusive institution, children with disability will also be having some specialized training. It's not that only in the classroom they're learning, they will also have some separate ways. For example, if a child has some visual impairment, that child might also have some special classes for learning medical writing language. And then there are inclusive classrooms as well. In this entire process, everyone gets benefited, and in this process, the learning outcomes for both have been better. That is what the results are saying. So it is high time we should consider having inclusive education. RT also talks about it, Right to Education Act. But here, one thing is very important. If you are going for an inclusive classroom, you ensure that you have teachers who are sufficiently trained. They are not biased. They should understand the barriers. They are sufficiently trained. We also have to invest in the teacher training, the methodologies. Teachers have to be trained for this. We also need to improve our learning methodologies. We also need to invest in the infrastructure, because if you are having children who have some form of disability, the school infrastructure should be better. So all these things have to be taken into consideration when we are moving towards inclusive education. All this inclusive education will not solve its purpose. And in the present scenario, again, the kind of education system we have, the kind of education infrastructure we are lagging behind in multiple dimensions. For example, as per the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, every school should have at least 9 infrastructure facilities, every government school, but hardly 5% of the school have all these facilities, have these facilities. So we need to improve on the infrastructural aspects. We need to have greater spending on education, then only we can go with it. But having inclusive education can solve multiple issues in the society. Now, another aspect related to education, the aspect of examinations. People with disability face certain challenges when it comes to writing exams. For example, the procedure of availing the facility of a scribe is very complicated. It needs to be simplified. There are different criteria. If you fulfill that criteria, then only you can, or that scribe has to fulfill those criteria. Scribe means someone who is writing the paper on your behalf. You are guiding that person, he's just writing what you are telling him. So availability of scribe is difficult, availing the facility of scribe is difficult. Apart from that, question papers need to be in multiple formats. For example, a person with visual impairment might not be able to read the paper. So it should be in writing format. Or other formats also you can consider, audio formats. So there should be option for people with disabilities. Then nowadays, exams are being conducted in online format as well. Many exams, many competitive exams, they have their online exams. Now, in case you're having an online exam, you also have to ensure that these exams are in accessible formats. Even if it is online, there can be multiple formats online as well. For example, audio-based testing. So you have to consider all these criteria when you are setting up papers or when you are designing the mechanism for conducting exams. So, and you should be providing as many choices as possible what kind of mode a person with disability wants to appear in the exam. And generally, compensatory time is provided. If it is not provided, you need to provide time. And generally, 1/3 time extra is provided for writing exams. So if let's say the paper is for 60 minutes, so 20 minutes extra should ideally be provided. So this is about the overlap between disability and education. What is the debate about inclusive and specialized education? How inclusive education can create a society free of stigma? How inclusive education creates a classroom which is a microcosm of the society? How inclusive education can improve learning outcomes? And what it can do to improve participation of children of people with disability in exams.
Now, we will look at some provisions for people with disability. What are some constitutional safeguards, or what are some legal safeguards
for people with disabilities? Now, in our constitution, we do not have any explicit provision for people with disability, no explicit provision, but we have many legal provisions. And also, many times, for example, right to life, it has been interpreted in favor of people with disability. So, implicitly, there have been different judgments related to people with disability. But explicitly, we have some statutory provisions. What are these statutory provisions? Now, first one, Rehabilitation Council of India Act 1992. What is this? Rehabilitation Council of India, it talks about creating institutions which will train teachers who will create a cadre of specialized teachers. So we are creating a cadre of specialized teachers through this particular institution, Rehabilitation Council of India. It is also a regulatory body which regulates specialized teacher training in case of India. So we are creating specialized teachers. It is also regulating the education of specialized teachers. Now, another provision we have, National Trust for Welfare of Persons with Autism, Cerebral Palsy, Mental Retardation, Multiple Disabilities. So some form of mental health issues, mental disabilities, for them we are creating a separate trust for their welfare. So it was in 1999. Apart from that, we have two very important provisions, and these provisions have been quite frequently in the news. The Right of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. We had a PWD Act, People with Disabilities Act of 1995. It was recently amended, and the final version was enacted in 2016 December. Similarly, we had a Mental Health Act 1987, but in recent times, last year, we passed Mental Health Act 2017. This particular law was in the news last year, and in mains exam also there was a question related to this. This year, this Mental Health Act can be very significant. What we will do, we will look at some of the provisions of these laws. Apart from that, we will also look at some international agreements India is part of, some international treaties. Now, before going into these laws treaties, one thing you would have observed, we are having multiple laws for handling the challenges people with disability face. We have a Rehabilitation Council of India Act, we are having a National Trust for Welfare of with a certain form of intellectual disabilities. We are having the right of persons with disabilities act. We are also having a mental health care act. So many provisions to handle the challenges people with disabilities face. But now tell me one thing, why are we going for multiple laws? Why can't we handle all these things using one single law? What can be the challenge here? What can be the issue here? So if you are having a single law, there can be multiple advantages. If you are having multiple laws, then you are creating multiple institutions, multiple authorities to handle the issues that people with disabilities face. When you are having multiple institutions, there can be clash among them, there can be conflicts among them. So a better way is having one single overarching law, one authority to handle all these things. So this was suggested by some commentators, but it was not taken up. Rather, the drafting committee for the new disability law, the right of persons with disability act, they decided that we should carry on with the present scheme of things, carry on with multiple laws. Why? See, we are having different laws and all the laws have some specific purpose. One such law is the mental health care law. Now, in case of India, mental health care has some sort of stigma. People do not give equal weightage to mental health as they give to physical health. So there is some sort of stigma involved. Now, in case mental health is also put under the umbrella of overall disability, it might be losing out. No significance given to it. So that is the reason you create separate law, create separate institutions for that. So that you prevent marginalization of healthcare. Apart from that, one more thing, mental health care requires some specific treatment, it requires specific services, some specific therapies. So again, all these things can get lost out. It can get marginalized. That is the reason having a single law might not be the right solution, at least at this point of time. So that is the reason we are going for multiple laws to negate the chances of marginalization of mental health issues. Now, if we look at some of the different treaties and laws. Now, United Nations Convention on the Right of Persons with Disability. What does it talk about people with disability? What kind of support people with disability require? India is one of the signatory of this particular treaty. India has also ratified it. Now, what kind of approach generally the governments have towards people with disability? This kind of approach is because of the kind of sentiment the average population has towards people with disability. Generally, when you meet a person with disability, there is this pity, there is this sympathy, the emotion of sympathy overruns you. But this is not correct. What United Nations Convention on Right of People with Disabilities is saying is we should not be having a charity model towards people with disabilities. Generally, charity model, that means you are just considering people with disabilities as recipients of some sort of benefits. That kind of approach should not be there. You should also consider them as equal human beings, give them equal status. Your aim should be to recognize them as equal human beings, equal citizens, and you should try to create a barrier-free environment. An environment which does not give any socio-economic cultural constraints, which do not prevent them from participating in the society on an equal basis. That should be there. Just giving subsidies might not help. Creating a barrier-free environment is more important. So move away from charity approach, move away from a pity-based approach. Another thing they're suggesting is we should go for community-based rehabilitation. Community should play a very significant role in the rehabilitation of people with disability. You should have community-based programs for rehabilitation. You should ensure social integration of all people with disabilities. You should ensure equalization of opportunities. Everyone should get opportunities. And people with disability should be involved in the process. Their families, their communities, everyone should get involved. Professionals who are experts, maybe specialized teachers, families, family members, community members, people with disability, all are participating, and they're the same. People with disability should get integrated into the mainstream. So, UN Convention is very significant. So, the kind of approach government generally had that people with disabilities are there, give them some sort of pension or something like that. That can be given, but more important is go for a barrier-free environment. Don't consider them with pity or sympathy. They are equal human beings. Make them equal partners in the development process. This is what UN Convention says. India is a signature of that. Now, there is another international agreement. The agreement is called Marrakesh Treaty. What is Marrakesh Treaty? Why do we call it Marrakesh Treaty? Marrakesh is the capital of Morocco. In the capital of Morocco, Marrakesh, an agreement was signed among countries, and this agreement is for improving the condition or improving the accessibility of visually impaired persons to books. How people who have some sort of visual impairment, they can have access to a greater body of knowledge. More number of books are available to them. For that, we are signing Marrakesh Treaty. Now, what is this? How is Marrakesh Treaty is facilitating this? Now, if I am writing a book, I am writing as a product of my own intellect. So I have intellectual property rights over that particular text. In case someone is reproducing it, publishing it, selling it, so they have to pay me some sort of royalty. I will get some part of it. So I get benefited by the production of that. Now, what has happened in this process is by protecting IPR. When you try to protect IPR, sometimes disability right is also getting impacted. Because of IPR, the body of the number of books in Braille language is very limited. If you have to translate a book into Braille language, you have to give royalty, and it will be very costly. In case of normal books, the size of the number of books that you are selling will be large, so you can afford that royalty. The number of translations will be large, you can afford it. But in case of translation to Braille format, the sheer size of the market will be less. Royalty might be, or paying the royalty might be difficult. Because of which, what has happened? The number of text in Braille language is very limited, and because of which, people with some sort of visual impairment, they are neglected in this process. So what this Marrakesh Treaty is doing? Countries are coming together, and they are bringing in some sort of limitations and exceptions to copyright rules. That means intellectual property right is given less preference over disability right. Disability right is given preference over intellectual property rights. So without following the norms of the intellectual property rights, you can now translate books into Braille language. So it will benefit people who have some sort of visual impairment. It will facilitate reproduction, distribution, and it will make available published works in formats designed for people with visual impairments. So this is Marrakesh Treaty. Now we will look at some specific provisions, some statutory provisions within India. A very important law that was enacted in 2016 is the Right of Persons with Disabilities Act. Right of People with Disabilities 2016. What are some of the key provisions? Previously, also we had People with Disabilities Act 1995. That particular law, it talked about only 7 types of disability. The present law, the new law, a very significant law, it talks about some 21 types of disability. Now, what are these different 21 types of disabilities? It talks about different speech and language disability. It also talks about different intellectual disability. It talks about different disabilities, for example, dwarfism and muscular dystrophy. For the first time, acid attack victims have also been included. So, acid attack victims will also be considered a type of disability. And again, these conditions, again, it can be changed from time to time. You can add different other types of disabilities here as well. The government from time to time order increase it. So, one thing we had observed in the beginning, that when it comes to numbers related to people with disability, the numbers keep on varying. There's a lot of variation. World Bank was giving some data, WHO was saying something else, and our census said something else. Now, our estimate of the extent of disability will be better, will be more reflective of the actual scenario. Now, this particular law also provides some sort of rights and entitlements to people with disability. Those who have at least 40% of disability will get some sort of benefits. For example, there can be reservation in higher education, in government jobs. Those who are in the age category 6 to 18 years, they will get right to free education. RT talks about free education from 6 to 40. It talks about this particular law is talking about education from 6 to 18 years. Apart from that, in government jobs, there will be reservation of 4%. Previous law had reservation for 3%. So this way, some rights, benefits are given to people with disabilities. Now, this particular law also talks about guardianship, guardian or guardianship. What we mean by this? Sometimes people with disabilities might not be able to carry out or might not be able to decide for themselves. In that case, they require the help of a guardian. The National Trust for the Welfare of Persons with Cerebral Palsy, that particular law, it talks about guardian. This Right of People with Disability Act also talks about guardianship. Now, it talks about two kinds of guardianship. A limited guardian and a plenary guardian. What do we mean by these terms? This particular guardianship will be avoided by district courts. If it is felt that a person is not able or will not be able to decide on his own behalf, so a guardian will be appointed. Now, two types of guardian. So a limited guardian is that person who will decide on behalf of that person, but a limited guardian and that person with disability both will play a role, joint responsibility, both will take that step. But when it comes to a plenary guardian, the plenary guardian will decide everything on behalf of the person with disability. So limited guardianship has a limited role. Plenary guardian has all the rights in that case. That plenary guardian can decide everything on behalf of the person with disability. Keep in mind, district courts are going to avoid this. Now, the law also has provision for creation of central and state advisory boards. What will these boards do? These boards will help in policy formulation, and these boards are at the central and the state level. So policy formulation, what kind of policy is suitable, or what can be the policy changes in the future, how that will benefit the disabled, that will be here. Apart from this, commissions will be set up at the central as well as the state level, chief commissioner and state commissioners. So central level and state level, you are setting up commissions, and these commissions are going to be regulatory bodies. They will see whether this particular law, the Right of Person with Disability Act, is being implemented properly or not. They will also be redressal bodies, and in case there is any overlap between this particular law and some other laws, they will try to address that. They will try to find a solution to this. So advisory boards and the commissions, they are at central and the central state level. District committees will be formed as per this law. These district committees will be addressing the local concerns of people with disabilities. If any challenges they're facing, mobility issues or something like that, district committees will take that into consideration. This law also calls for creation of funds at national and the state level. So these funds will provide financial support to people with disabilities. There is also provision for penalties. In case some offences are committed against people with disabilities, then special courts will be constituted. In case violation of rights of people with disabilities is there, these particular courts will handle that. So right of people with disability tries to handle multiple dimensions. Increases the type of disabilities, gives some rights and entitlements, creates different kind of boards which can help in policy formulation, creates commissions which will monitor the implementation, also creates a mechanism for guardianship, limited and plenary guardianship, district committees, funding parents. All these things are part of this law. So a positive step, a step in the right direction. Now, can there be, or is there any criticism of this law? Is there any challenge with this particular law? See, this is a law which is being drafted by the center. Now, center is drafting the law, but you are creating different institutions at the state level, also at the municipal level, local level. So there can be different financial obligations on the states and the municipalities. The law does not talk about all these things. It does not have along with this law, we are not having any estimate of the expenses required by the state and the municipalities. So that is one criticism. Apart from that, it provides reservation for members with disabilities. Now, one thing here, reservation affirmative action is a positive step. But what has happened? Previously also the law was providing reservation. We had some 3% reservation in government jobs. But many times it was observed that there were vacancies despite having reservation. And what was the problem? Even if you are reserving seats, you are not having sufficient candidates to fill these vacancies. Why do we not have sufficient candidates? Because the basic primary level education or the basic education, graduate level education is suffering when it comes to people with disabilities. And since they do not have access to education, they are not able to fill up the vacancies. So again, we need to address these basic issues. Access to education at the primary level, school level, college education. Then only we can ensure that this particular law is successful. It is able to meet its intended objective. Also, sometimes there have been some criticism that this provision of guardianship can be misused, especially the plenary guardianship, where everything is being decided on behalf of that individual. And again, there is no such specific forum as per this law where you can raise your voice against your guardian. Those kind of mechanisms are not provided. Internal mechanism, in case guardian is misusing his or her power, what you can do, that kind of avenue is not there. And another dimension where there is a conflict is this particular law might be in conflict with some other laws. For example, medical termination of pregnancy act. See, according to this law, also there is a provision for abortion. In case there is some sort of deformity, a female can go for abortion, and the number of medical practitioners that is required, the consultation, that varies. It will be two practitioners in between 12 to 20th week of pregnancy. Here, it is with the help of one registered medical practitioner. So there is some conflict. For example, conflict with medical termination of pregnancy act. So these are some challenges when it comes to the implementation of this particular law. Now, apart from this particular statutory provision, there was also this awareness campaign. This particular campaign, not just awareness, a campaign to ensure universal access, a campaign to provide equal opportunity, a campaign to create inclusive society. This campaign was targeted towards members of our society who have some sort of impairments. So the name of the campaign is Accessible India Campaign. As the name suggests, we have to make our country more accessible to the different sections of the society. Now, what are some of the provisions under this particular campaign? So this campaign is saying that all our international airports and all the railway stations in the top tier cities, they should be fully accessible to the disabled. At least 10% of these public transport carriers, for example, the Indian Railways, 10% of it should be fully accessible. At least 50% of all government buildings in the state capitals and in the national capitals should be fully accessible. At least 50% of public documents should be in formats which are easily accessible. Then there should be web portals and mobile applications which measure inaccessibility or accessibility. For example, you create an index, let's say from 0 to 10. 10 means it is completely accessible. 0 means it is not at all accessible. And you can have a Google Map kind of thing. Map. Here you have different locations. A location which is completely accessible, that will be color coded in a different format. Location which is not accessible, maybe red color is used for that. So from the map itself, you can see which areas are completely accessible, which areas are not completely accessible. So this will also create a pressure on different institutions to increase their own accessibility. So Accessible India Campaign talks about all these things. It also talks about creation of accessible police stations, hospitals, having accessible tourism. People should be able to access different tourist areas as well. It also talks about creating accessible courts. Court facilities should be accessible to everyone. TV programs should be accessible. That means, how can TV programs be accessible? For example, sign language in news. They have that. The news is communicated using sign language. So someone who cannot hear can use that. Or using subtitles. Again, if you cannot hear it, you can at least read the subtitles. So TV programs can be in multiple formats which can help people with disability. Web portal, mobile application, I already told you. Accessibility index, which will measure disabled friendliness. Also, part of the campaign was rechristening the name, the term. Rather than using the term disabled, used divine body, divine abled. So rather using the term Viklang, use the term Divyang. Viklang is disabled. It has some negative connotations. Divyang means divine body. But one thing here, we are using the term disability when we're discussing this topic. Why I'm using the term disability? Because United Nations Convention on the Right of People with Disabilities, it also uses the term disability, and the law that we passed, Right of People with Disabilities, that also is using the term disability. That is the reason I'm using the term disability. But again, campaign can have certain changes. The mindset of the people, mindset of society can be impacted by these kind of things, euphemisms that can handle these things. Apart from that, separate institutions need to be created for people with some form of impairments. For example, those who cannot hear, those who cannot speak. A special university will also be created for people with disabilities. So these are some provisions under Accessible India Campaign. And why it is important? Accessibility is very important. Accessibility is important for someone's mobility, for increasing your own purchasing power, improving your position in the social hierarchy. Accessibility is important. So we need to address that particular gap. We need to create an inclusive India. We need to create an accessible India. And this particular campaign tries to is a positive step in that direction. Apart from this, last year we also drafted another policy, the policy for mental health. So we had a Mental Health Care Act before this in 1987 it was drafted. This new provision came into being last in 2017. This particular law is very important for addressing the issue of mental health care. What are some of the provisions under this? It recognizes the right of an individual with mental illnesses. People who have mental illnesses, they have the right to access different healthcare benefits, different healthcare institutions. This particular law has a provision called Advanced Directive. What do we mean by Advanced Directive? As the term suggests, as the two terms, as the name suggests, the two words are advanced and directive. So as per this law, a person can decide in advance, can give a direction in advance, what kind of treatment should be meted out to him or her in case there is a mental health situation. So in advance, you are deciding what kind of treatment has to be given if you are having a mental health scenario. Apart from this particular law also talks about decriminalization of suicide. Previously, suicide was a criminal offense as per the Indian Penal Code. Section 309 of Indian Penal Code criminalized suicide. This means if a person is trying to commit suicide and that person is failing in that process, he will be considered as a criminal, and there can be different mechanisms to deal with that. Some provisions, some law will take its own course. But this law decriminalizes it. Why decriminalizes it? Suicide is the last resort. Why is someone committing suicide? Definitely he has faced some sort of mental health issue, anxiety, depression. There are different levels. He has faced some of these issues. That is the reason he has resorted to suicide. No one resorts to suicide just for the sake of committing suicide. So suicide is a type of mental health, or maybe the reflection of some sort of mental health issue that the person is facing. So you need to decriminalize it. So they are doing it. Apart from that, they are also regulating electroconvulsive therapy. You might have observed some people who are having some mental health issues. They are treated, they are given short treatments. That is a curative measure. Now there are different allegations that this is very harsh or they are not properly done. So that is the reason this Mental Health Care Act, it is trying to regulate it. It is a very painful process. So how they are regulating it? So in case a person has some mental health issue, can be provided electroconvulsive treatment, but only after giving sedatives. So the pain will be less. Apart from that, these kind of treatments cannot be given to children. Those are below the age of 5 years, it cannot be given to them. So regulation of electroconvulsive therapy is also part of this. Apart from that, this law tries to improve the quality of healthcare. It also tries to create, or not just improve, it tries to create a uniform quality of healthcare. So quality of healthcare will be uniform throughout the country. So what they're trying to do, they're setting up different institutions at the center and the state level. Center and state mental health authorities. Now these authorities will set norms. They will advise the government. Norms of healthcare. So these uniform norms will ensure quality of healthcare remains uniform throughout the country. Different mental health establishments will have to register themselves up with these authorities. Apart from this particular law also calls for creation of different mental health care review commission and board. These are the boards which will decide the procedure for giving advanced directive. Advanced directive, if you are getting confused, just think like this. You have wills, and individual decides that after his death, how his property is going to be distributed, it should be shared among the different stakeholders. Similarly, here also you are deciding beforehand in case mental health issues there, how to be taken up. So mental health review commission and board will decide the conditions, the criteria on which advanced directive can be given. So Mental Health Care Act, it talks about different dimensions. The right of an individual to access mental health care. This particular law also tries to create uniform norms throughout India for mental health care. It's trying to regulate that. So it's setting up different authorities, different mental health institutions will have to register under it. It also creates a provision for advanced directives, which is very new. It creates institutions which will be governing this. It decriminalizes suicide. It also regulates the process of administering electroconvulsive therapy. So this is about Mental Health Care Act. Now, what are some of the challenges that this particular law faces? Now, just like in case of right of people with disabilities, here also the same thing. Center is making a law, but states will also be having some implications. For example, the state level authorities we have to set up this state mental health authority. So financial implications will also be there on the state. So we need to take that into consideration. Financial estimates are not there. So one of the criticisms is this. Apart from that, another criticism is this particular law can make the psychiatrist uncomfortable. Why? Because we are regulating the work of the psychiatrist. For example, electroconvulsive therapy, there are different restrictions. These things should be left to the domain of the expert. So psychiatrist can better judge the situation and better handle it in a better manner. So when you're putting restrictions, a psychiatrist might be uncomfortable. And the most important dimension here, or most important challenge here, challenge which can inhibit the successful implementation of Mental Health Care Act is the stigma that is there with mental health care in society. Generally, in society, people do not give equal weightage to physical fitness and mental health care. If someone is falling sick, they will immediately go to the hospital, or they might immediately pop a pill if there is any physical ailment. But whenever there is some mental health issue, people will not. And in case if someone is having some mental health issue, others might ridicule that person. They will consider this person mentally weak. So there is no such concept of weakness or strength here. Mental health issue is for real. In case someone has a mental health issue, they should consult healthcare and there should not be any stigma. Sometimes people wait for the last moment, then they will take the help of a psychiatrist or a psychologist, therapist. You should not be waiting for the last moment. So main challenge for addressing mental health care is the stigma, the society itself. So we need to take adequate measures to remove the stigma. In recent times, things are changing for the positive, in the right direction. For example, in recent times you might have observed different celebrities, they have come out in the open. For example, Deepika Padukone. She was winning national awards, but at the same time she was having different mental health issues, and she talks about it in details. Dr. Shyam, her psychologist, he also talks about it. So when celebrities come out in the open, these kind of things can, or these kind of awareness campaigns or this kind of stigma can be removed. These awareness campaigns help in removal of stigma. So we need to ensure these stigma is removed, then only we can have successful implementation of this particular law. So this is about Mental Health Care Act and the challenges that we face when it comes to its implementation. Now the last part, when we are trying to address the challenges that people with disability face, what challenges we are facing on our own, and how do we need to address it? What can be the way out? What can be some of the solutions? So you might get a question, these are the problems that people with disabilities face. What will be your suggestion to improve it? So what will you write in that case? So when you are crafting a policy or when you are creating a framework to address the challenges that people with disability face, we face different challenges. For example, we do not have sufficient data. Lack of data is one big problem. We need to address that. Next, we do not have adequate representation of people with disabilities in our policy circles. So they are marginalized. We do not have sufficient members in the civil services who come from this background. We do not have sufficient politicians who come from this background. Since we do not have sufficient representation of people with disabilities in these areas, so their voice is not there, they are marginalized. So their perspective is somewhere lacking. Apart from that, different government buildings, websites, they are also not disabled friendly. So in case a person with disability wants to access government services, wants to give his own constructive feedback, we might not be able to take that because our institutions are not disabled friendly. Apart from that, our constitution does not have an explicit provision, non-discrimination provision. It does not include disability as a ground for non-discrimination. For example, if you look at our rights to equality, you cannot discriminate someone on the basis of age, gender, and all these provisions are there. But it does not talk about disability. Disability as a ground for non-discrimination is not explicitly mentioned. So it is sometimes suggested that we should include this. Constitution of South Africa, Constitution of Sri Lanka, have these measures. You cannot discriminate someone on the basis of disability. So when we are trying to draft policies, we are facing these kind of challenges. We need to take this into consideration. Now, what more is an issue? Our laws have traditionally been focusing on the charity approach. We do not consider them as equal partners in the development process. that also needs to be addressed. So if you are creating a policy framework for the disability, what needs to be considered? We need to define disability, or we need to look at disability from that social model perspective. That means disability is not just a medical condition. Disability is not just some sort of impairment. The problem also lies on the side of the society. So we need to define disability from the social model perspective. And if you're defining it in that manner, that means we will be, or our aim here is creating a barrier-free environment. Society imposes different barriers, we are reducing those barriers. So only if we are going for a social model of disability, we will be focusing on a barrier-free environment. So one way is this. We have to move away from the charity-based approach. We have to recognize that people with disability are equal human beings, they're equal citizens. We need to create a barrier-free environment so that they can participate in the society as equal human beings. So move away from charity-based approach. But this does not mean that we will not provide them with any social protection. We also need to provide them with some special social protection. Maybe preferential access to public distribution services. Why we discuss one thing? People with disability, highly likely they will be in the lower socioeconomic categories, and when you have a person with disability, his chances of employment is less, and someone else might also not be working in the family because that person is supporting the person with disability. So they are poor, they need special social protection. Constitution can be amended, disability can be included as a ground for non-discrimination. Apart from this, we need to have higher investment in the field of health and education. We need to have inclusive education. So for that, we need to invest in teacher training, in new methodologies, new infrastructure. Apart from that, investment in health is also required. More number of healthcare facilities will be there. Increase accessibility to healthcare facilities. How do we benefit? We have discussed one thing. One of the reasons for disability is women are not able to access healthcare institutions on time. So investment in health can also take care of this. Apart from that, we need to take care, or we need to involve civil society. We need to engage more NGOs. As United Nations Convention on Rights of People with Disability also talks about, we have to focus on community-based rehabilitation. So here we have the role of NGOs and civil societies. We also need to promote participation of disabled members in private sector. There should be a move towards non-discrimination in employment. In case there is an organization which has a fixed percentage of members from disabled sections, a good number from disabled sections, then we can give them some sort of incentive. So maybe some sort of tax incentive is provided to those organizations which have a fixed percentage of members from disabled section. That can be advantageous for us. Apart from that, we need to reduce the marginalization that they face. We need to have greater number of people with disability in each and every sphere, in markets, in politics, in education, every sphere. We need to have more coordination among different institutions. Sometimes there is lack of coordination. Sometimes there can be conflict between institutions. For example, there can be conflict between Ministry of HR, Ministry of Social Justice and Employment, because of which some people with disability might be excluded from different kind of benefits they're entitled to get. So we need to ensure a better coordination mechanism between them. And the most important final thing, we need to address the data scarcity, data crunch that we have. We need to have more data related to people with disabilities. What kind of data we need? Maybe age segregation, maybe segregation on the basis of education. Maybe what are the reasons why we have people with, or regional segregation of this data. Also, what kind of disability is more rampant? Which area of this kind of disability is more rampant? So accordingly, we can have a targeted approach to handle these issues. So these can be the broader policy framework to address the challenges that people with disabilities face. All the angles, health, education, social protection, what has to be the governing principles, all these things have to be there. So people with disabilities, what issues they face? How do you target this particular topic for your exam perspective? Understand the definition. It is not just a medical phenomenon, it is more than that. So you have to keep this in mind. Just try to keep it in your mind and accordingly answer it. So understand what is disability, what are the different dimensions of disability, what are the different determinants of why disability occurs, and disability is preventable. Keep this in mind. Disability, some people are born with disability, that can also be prevented. Some type of disability, it is acquired during lifetime, that can also be managed, if not prevented. Now, what are some of the issues they face, some of the concerns related to disability, and what are some of the mechanisms? The domestic mechanisms as well as international provisions. What are the challenges when it comes to drafting policies, and what can be some way out? All these things sums up our session on disability. Keep one thing in mind, this National Mental Health Care Act was introduced in 2017, so it is a hot topic. For 2018 means can be important for next year means as well. So this is about people with disabilities, one vulnerable section in our society. Thank you.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Byju's classes. In this session, we are going to discuss how the pandemic has impacted the people with disabilities. So, the pandemic has created a situation where the people with disabilities are more vulnerable, and they're vulnerable in many ways. They're vulnerable when it comes to contracting the virus. So, people with disabilities they might face greater risks. The chances of their contracting the virus is more, and also their chances of developing severe illness is also more. Now, what is the reason why this is happening? We'll try to understand that. Apart from that, we'll see what the government of India has done, and what are the issues right now that is going on despite the interventions from the side of the government, and what can be done about it. So, this is a broad overview of things that we're going to talk about in the next few minutes. First thing, who are these people with disability? We have an idea about that. We know what is the meaning of disability. Disability means there are some people who have some physical or mental impairment, and they face different kinds of social cultural barriers which prevent them from effectively participating in the social process. So that is the meaning of disability. So disability is something social. So people have different physical and mental impairments, but there exist different kinds of social cultural barriers which prevent them from effectively participating in the society. And we had seen what issues people with disability face when it comes to making policy for people with disability. What are the challenges policymakers face? Now, what is the extent of disability in the society? As per World Health Organization, 15% of the world's population has some form of disability. But as per our data, as per the census 2011 data, one person in every 10th household has some element of disability. So every 10th household, there is one member with disability. So again, if you compute these numbers, it will be roughly around 2.2%. So as per WHO, 50% of the world has some form of disability, but as per the census 2011 data, 2.2% of India's population has some element of disability. Now, before we start the discussion, there's one very interesting quote by Emerson that I found. He says that disabled people are not only the most deprived human beings in the developing world, they're also the most neglected. So keep these two things in mind, that they are deprived and they're most neglected. Now, what do we infer from this? It shows that people with disability find it very difficult to access different kind of resources, be it physical resources, material resources, different kind of resources. It is very difficult for them to get access to. And if you are deprived along these lines, it can again have multiple repercussions. And this is what we will see how all these things pan out. So first thing, people with disabilities, they are at greater risk of contracting COVID-19. So the chances of they being exposed to the virus is much more. The chances of their contracting the virus is much more. Now, what could be the reason why this is happening? First thing, some of the things that people without disabilities take for granted is maintaining hygiene. I mean, people who do not have any form of disability, they can easily wash their hands, they can follow different kind of hygiene protocols. But people with disabilities might find it difficult to maintain these things which might seem extremely trivial. For example, accessing basic sinks might be difficult, or rubbing hands to wash, rubbing your hands so that you are washing your hands thoroughly. These are things which might be difficult for people who are facing some form of disability. So some certain things like certain basic things like hand washing can also be difficult for them. And we all know how hand washing is very, very important to deal with the pandemic in the present circumstances. Second thing, people who do not have any form of disability might find it easy to maintain social distancing. But just think of it, some people who have disability, they will always need the support of someone. There is always a need for some sort of physical support from someone. So how do you maintain social distance in that scenario? And some people with disability might be staying in different kind of institutions. Maybe it's a shelter run by an NGO, or it might be healthcare institution. So they will be staying in different kind of healthcare institutions. And these institutions, how do you maintain social distance? So that is again a problem. Apart from that, sometimes to access information, people with disabilities might have to touch things. I mean, let's say there is a person who has visual impairment. How do you get information? By reading braille text. So again, you have to touch other things. And sometimes for physical support also you have to touch things. For example, someone who has lost his limb might require some sort of support. So when you have to touch different things, it also makes you, or at least puts you at greater risk to contracting the virus. Apart from that, it might be difficult for them to access public health information. Whatever warnings, whatever precautions are given out by the government from time to time, they might find it difficult to access this information because the information might not be in multiple formats which people with different various forms of disability can access. On top of all these things, people with disabilities might have to go to hospitals, might have to frequently visit rehabilitation centers, might be there undergoing different kind of therapies. So as they're going to these kind of institutions, their chance of contracting the virus also increases because in hospitals, again, you have COVID-19 cases. So these are the places which are the hotspots, and they're exposed to, they have to go to these hotspots and they're exposed to the virus. Apart from that, sometimes PWDs, they are dependent on caregivers for their day-to-day requirements. So again, since they're dependent on caregivers, the chances of contracting a virus from the caregivers also increases. The caregiver might be meeting multiple people. Also, one more thing they have faced is sometimes the caregivers might not come because they themselves might not be working, as they themselves feel that there's a risk of contamination, or sometimes they might themselves be socially isolating them. So in that scenario, what happens? The services that people with disability get it gets hampered, or it gets separate for some period of time. Apart from that, it is difficult to expect people with intellectual impairment to maintain self-isolation. They have intellectual impairment, they might not be able to do things on their own. So expecting them to maintain self-isolation might not be right. They might not be able to cope up with self-isolation. So all these things puts people with different forms of disability at higher risk when it comes to contracting the virus. And if they contract the virus, then the chances of it getting aggravated, the chances of this taking severe forms is also very high. So PWDs are at greater risk of developing more severe cases of COVID-19. Now, what is the reason for this? Among PWDs, the chance of different kind of diseases, the chance of different kind of morbidity is also very high. We have seen that. So they have different kind of existing health conditions, and which might be related to respiratory functions, which can be related to immune system functions, heart disease, diabetes. So since they have all these pre-existing conditions, and on top of that, if they have COVID-19, it increases their risk. So again, it can increase the chances of mortality among people with disability. Apart from this, one major issue they face is access to healthcare. There are different barriers, and people with disabilities might find it difficult to access appropriate healthcare services. So if they don't get the right health interventions at the right point of time, again, it develops into severe cases. So barriers to accessing healthcare and pre-existing health conditions like respiratory issues, heart issues, diabetes, immune system issues can make things worse for them. When we had this pandemic, and in fact, the pandemic is going on right now, what have been the different steps taken by the government? Now, whatever different governments have taken different steps, I mean, that might not be the concern. What is more important for us is what are the steps that the Indian government has taken up. Now, as we all know that we have a national social assistance program. Now, under this program, different kind of pensions are given to people who are extremely vulnerable. So under NSAP, you have pensions for widows, you have pensions for old people, you also have pensions for those who are disabled. So under NSAP, we had this pension scheme. Now, what the government did was they provided 3 months pension in advance. So whatever pension was supposed to be provided to people with disabilities over the next 3 months, it was provided in advance. Apart from that, an ex gratia of 1,000 was also provided in 2 installments. And the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare also issued different kind of advisories. The Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities recognized that PWDs are more vulnerable to the virus because of their physical, sensory, and cognitive limitations. We already have an idea about physical limitations. Again, there are different barriers to their mobility. They might not be able to do things which others can. Those without any physical impairment can easily do. Then there can be different cognitive limitations. That means their mental capabilities might be less as compared to others. So they need to understand things. They need to understand different kind of precautions. That is issued by the government from time to time is also less. Also, there can be sensory limitations in the sense that some of them might not be able to read things. Some of them might not be able to hear different kind of instructions. So the information that is provided out, the public health information that is required, you have to follow. I mean, you have to follow it all. Fighting the pandemic becomes difficult, and the chances of contracting the virus becomes high. So these kind of things they might not be able to do properly since they have sensory limitations and cognitive limitations. So the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities also recognizes that. So now the question is the amount good enough? I mean, hardly you have given 1,000 rupees, and again some advance you have provided. Is it sufficient to deal with the pandemic, especially when you are disabled, and most likely you would have a very good source of income? And we have seen this thing, right? People who have disabilities, they are at the bottom when it comes to income. They do not ownership of assets, they lack ownership of assets. When it comes to education, they lag behind. So they already are vulnerable. On top of that, there is this pandemic which has made things worse for them. So in this situation, is this amount, are these interventions good enough? So let's look at what are some of the findings, what are some of the challenges they face. There is this national platform for the rights of disabled. They outrightly mentioned that, outrightly stated that this amount that has been provided to people with disabilities is very meager, it is extremely inadequate. And even if people with disabilities are being provided, not everyone can access it. I mean, this is something from the side of the government. They are saying that we will be providing these things, but if you look at the reality on the ground, this might not be the case in the sense that many will not be able to access this meager amount. So what is the reason many people with disabilities do not have disability certificates to access all these so-called benefits? Apart from this, I mean, how do you recognize who is disabled? Who are the ones who are going to get these benefits? Very few people, because at present, the number of people with disability that is counted is as per the census, and the census definition is on the basis of only 7 types of disabilities. This is something that we have discussed in details. So only 7 forms of disability had been included in the 2011 census, and at present, the new laws that we have had, the Right of Person with Disability Act, which came in 2016, it recognizes 21 disabilities, but the census 2011 is on the basis of the 7 types of disabilities. So a lot of people will not be calculated in, will not be counted as a result of
the benefits will be accrued only to very few people. So most PWD people will be left out of the government target. On top of that, people with disability will continue to find it difficult to access information and services. So there will be lack of access to information services. And what is the reason for this? We know that people with disabilities find it difficult to access information. Many of them will be relying on touch to access information. Many of them will be relying on audio to access information. But when it comes to websites, when it comes to the way information is being disseminated, not all information is being disseminated in multiple formats. Also, the websites are not disability friendly. As per the Rights of Person with Disability Act 2016, information should be disseminated in multiple formats. The format should be accessible, and the government website should also be accessible. But that has not happened. There has not been a dramatic departure from what used to be there in the past. So we have a law in place, but again, the law has not been implemented properly. So in the aftermath of the pandemic, what happened was the Ministry of Social Justice and Employment, it advised different departments that they should again coordinate, they should work with different state governments, they should work with the unitary to ensure that all COVID-related information should be accessible in audio formats, braille formats, so that people with different kind of visual impairments, hearing impairments can access it. But since 2016, we have had the law. Things have not changed. How do we expect that things will change overnight? So sudden instructions to create infrastructure might not be possible. It will continue to remain as a dead letter. On top of that, the institutions, the mechanisms that we have, they might not be sufficient to deal with the problems that people with disability face. So as we had discussed before, we have a right of person with disability act. According to that, we have different commissions at different levels. So you have the commission at the central level, then you have commissions at the state level. At the state level, you have state disability commissioners. They are the nodal agencies, and they have been asked to coordinate with different relevant bodies to provide different kind of support to people with disabilities. But the problem is many of these state disability commissioners, the position itself is not something that's permanent in nature, and many of the personnel here, they do not have the power, they do not have planning, they do not have adequate knowledge, motivation to execute these action plans. So again, since the institutions are not good enough, or the incentives within the institutions are not aligned in a particular manner, things might not change overnight. Also, many PWDs, they work in the unemployed, or they're working, they're employed in the unorganized sector. So many of them are homeless, some of them are contractual laborers, they're migrant workers, beggars. Just think of it, if you're homeless, what kind of social distancing will you be able to follow? If you're a contractual laborers, most likely during the lockdown, wherever you're working, it would have been shut. And even if the lockdown has been, lockdown is no longer imposed, but most likely the way the demands have crashed, the different setups are not working as expected. So they would be out of their jobs, or they would not be getting any salaries. Many of them are migrant workers, and as they did not have sufficient facilities in the areas where they were staying, they had to move back to their native towns. And many of them are beggars again. Issues of homelessness will be there. How do you ensure that how do you ensure different kind of safe living conditions? How do you ensure that you're practicing social distancing? How you're practicing different kind of safe hygiene practices? So many of the whatever guidelines have been provided by the government, they do not actually address the issues that PWDs face. Apart from that large section of the PWDs, they are moderately impaired, and as they're moderately impaired, they can find work, and they migrate to different parts of the country to find work. So many PWDs had migrated to different corners of the country in search of livelihood. But when this lockdown was there, because of the lockdown, the factories were not operating, and many of these people did not have any other source of income. Most likely they did not have any savings. So there was a situation where they panicked and they just wanted to return home. So these stranded migrants, stranded PWD migrants, need to be rehabilitated immediately on the priority list. Some of them continue to be in this kind of situation where they're panicking and they want to go back home. Apart from that, PWDs require different services on a day-to-day basis. For example, access to different kind of aids devices is still curtailed in many places because again, many offices, many organizations are not working in the full capacity. They're working in suboptimal capacity. So you have to find out ways by which alternative provisions should be made so that they can access these devices, these devices, these services. Apart from that, alternative provisions have to be made to ensure that people with disability are able to access, are able to get the disability certificates. Those delivery should be ensured for free at affordable rates. Direct cash assistance should be provided. Apart from that, public distributions, they should also be given some sort of special assistance again under the public distribution systems. I had told this before as well. If there is someone in the family who has disability, most likely it will be difficult for the person to find employment. Again, not because this person is not qualified, but because there is discrimination. Pretty much happen that they are also not qualified because people with disability find it difficult to access education, they find it difficult to access skills. As a result of which, again, finding appropriate jobs becomes difficult. So the person with disability will not be properly employed. Employed. And again, it might happen that this person requires intervention, he or she requires support from someone. So that person also has to be engaged with this person for most of the part of the day. As a result of which, that person also might not be getting employed. So whenever there is any person with disability, you are basically losing out on two jobs within the household. So they need to be provided greater access to the public distribution system, greater support from the public distribution system, greater cash assistance can be provided. Also for those who are disabled, special quarantine rehabilitation centers need to be there. Special training should be provided to health professionals to deal with PWDs when they're quarantined. Also, a large number of PWDs are beggars and homeless. And just think of it, beggars. I mean, if you're homeless, how do you maintain all these social distancing, or how do you maintain hygiene practices? So you have to find out ways by which there can be reasonable accommodation to these people, so that the risk of contamination to these people can be reduced. And again, if you are addressing that, the risk of contamination to others can also be reduced. So these are some more problems that people with disabilities have been facing, and this also includes some way ahead of some solutions that can be possibly taken. So with this, we will be concluding our discussion on the impact of COVID-19 on people with disabilities. So who are people with disabilities and why they are at higher risk when it comes to contracting COVID-19? Also, why they are at higher risk of having severe cases of COVID-19 because again they have morbidities and again there are different barriers to healthcare. What has the government been doing? Is it sufficient? What more needs to be done? So this is about the impact of COVID-19 on people with disabilities. Thank you.